I honestly wrote on there on my bucket list, make a bird explode by feeding it rice. And it's been there over the course of like so many years. And every time I look at it, especially now, I'm like, you're evil, Marilyn. Like that. Why would you want to? Not only that, but like, okay, that's gross. You know what I mean? So. Hey guys, welcome to Morning Coffee.
Morning coffee.
Woohoo! I guess I like making those kind of exclamations a lot.
Woohoo.
The yay and the woohoo and the alright and stuff. I have lots of excitement to give to the world, so it's okay.
That's good.
Yes.
At least you're not a Debbie Downer.
That's true. Well, sometimes I can be, but I'm not even a big fan of myself when I am. I'm just kind of like, all right, Marilyn, chill out. Like,
yeah.
All right, so we're going to go over some quick announcements. If you're listening to this episode on Spotify, we're hoping that you have already listened to the first 6 episodes. And you might have noticed that we might have been a little heavy on the, subscribe on YouTube or leave comments down below. And that's because that's where we started. And, hooray for us. We've now branched off onto this new platform. And so we're excited that you are listening to us. But that's just a little explanation as to why the content seems to be a little heavy on that side. Do we have any other announcements?
Just kind of to reiterate what we announced on our live the other day that we had about our 2 special projects that are coming out soon.
Oh, yes. So we should have that rolling out as well. You'll probably see the titles specify a little bit more if it's just as morning coffee, and then the 7th espresso shot, 8th espresso shot. That's our Thursday releases that we do together. But when it says like morning coffee, dark roast, or if it just says dark roast or light roast, that's specifying to our mini series. They're shorter videos that we're going to be doing individually. So take a look. I probably won't give too much details now because we kind of want to leave that,
Yeah, to your own imagination. So let's get into today's topiks.
Yes.
Talking about bringing in a little bit of sunshine into our lives.
I'm rubbing off on you. Yes. So excited. That was a great transition. I love it.
Thank you. I try sometimes.
All right. So our first topic is gardening, or more specifically, gardening 101.
Yeah, and this was actually a listener suggestion, right?
Yes, it was. So somebody wanted to have some gardening 101, which I am with you. I say this, maybe I overstate this, or my close or my loved ones have probably heard me say this way too often, but I recently, well, actually a year ago, I attempted my first garden, and as a newbie, maybe, I'm going to generalize this, but I wanted to go all out. Of course, I had no experience whatsoever, and I, in the past, had managed to kill a bamboo plant, which, if you're familiar with bamboo plants, it is very difficult. Yeah, they're very hard to kill those because they require very little effort. They're great. They're great plant pets. And I killed mine, and so that should have been a lesson learned for me, but I wanted to go all out. So I was the kind of person that just thought I needed all these cool seeds and stuff. And
yeah,
when we explain this and talk about like what you need and all of that, it's going to seem very obvious maybe to some, especially if you have a green thumb, but along the way I will explain why this just didn't occur to me. So
yeah, I have I can keep them alive. Mm-hmm. So at the beginning they're really great, they're growing, they're beautiful, and then and then after a while they kind of die. So I can keep it up for a little bit, and then I don't know, I guess I forget about them. just leave them off to the side.
To the side, yeah.
And I feel bad.
Well, and I think gardening is sometimes a trial and error. I think, some people theoretically think it's their thing, and then they quickly find out, like me, that it's not. And then other people maybe don't think that it'll be something that they'll be great at, or, but it's one of those things, like, you have to try it, and then you realize either it's something you enjoy and you want to keep learning, or it's just, let's leave it to the green thumbers, is what I'll call them.
Green thumbers.
Green thumbers. So let's just go to the basics. Back to when they taught us about, plants. The very basics that plants need is sun, water, nutrients, obviously, that go in their soil.
Yeah. Basics. And then, what I read was pretty much plants are like people. They're not all going to be the same in the same amount of what they want or what they need. Mm-hmm. So, some plants, they need a lot of sunlight. Mm-hmm. Some need a little less. Some need a lot of water. Some need a little less. Yeah. But everybody needs a combination of these three.
Yeah, the way I read it was that every plant has a different personality. And I really wish somebody... I mean, again, this may be okay, duh. But to me, I don't know. I didn't see it that way. So I feel like had it been stated like that to me in the beginning, it would have, I guess, in my mind made more sense. Okay, so the requirements are different. I just kind of planted them, again, with some information that I had. And, obviously each packet will sometimes give you okay, this is the temperature, this is how much water it needs and all of that. But I didn't take that into account. Each plant has different needs. And if you have a wide variety of plants that are all across the board, then it's hard for you to keep up with all of them, because it's not just yeah.
And then sometimes your plants dying aren't entirely your fault, but kind of are, because some plants they need a certain environment to grow. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you live in a certain area where that environment just is not feasible for that plant to grow.
That's true.
And so you bought the plant not knowing exactly the environment that it needed, but that plant died, and so you think, oh, this is my fault. I didn't water it enough. I didn't do everything in my care to take care of it. And then it's honestly no, you just have too much sun here, so sorry.
Yeah, that is true. I did read that a plant will perform best when they have the best temperature for its growth, which kind of goes back to your statement about the environment. And so there's, again, didn't know this when I was looking at in the back of the packets and the seeds, but a lot of them will have some of them will even have a map, and then it's a plant hardness zones or something like that, and it's basically kind of for gardeners and growers to determine which plant will most likely thrive in that location based off of the average annual minimum winter temperature and all of that. So it kind of gives it to you, but you also have to be, I guess
it has to be willing to put in that research and be okay, does that plant grow here?
Mm-hmm, exactly.
And so there's multiple ways you can have a garden. Mm-hmm. And so they have container gardens where it's just kind of basically in a pot. And then you have raised bed gardens, which is you build kind of a box outside.
With the wood?
Yeah, with the wood and stuff. And then you have an in-ground garden, which is basically in your own soil in your backyard without the wooding around it.
Okay, gotcha. Also, the type of soil, now this was another thing. So the type of soil that you have will also determine how much water will be available for your plants. So whenever we went to go buy all of our tools and materials and everything like that, there's a ton of different soils. So again, I think if you're an expert or if you've done that, you have that experience, you kind of have an idea already of what soil is best for what type of plant. Mm-hmm. When I was there, I mean, it was there's so many soils. They all seem to have nutrients in them. So it didn't seem like I could lose in any way. And that's not to say that that's where I went wrong, but I think it helps to be less confused when you're looking at different packs of soil and you're just kind of I don't know, maybe this is the one I need for my vegetables or for my flowers, or is it different? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I feel like when you go into the assumption of, oh, it's plants, how hard can this be? But they had to think, oh, this plant only likes this type of soil with this amount of nitrogen in it. Oh, but I need that fertilizer for this other plant that I also want to plant in that same garden, but that doesn't have the same amount. So it's kind of like there's a whole bunch of planning that actually has to be put into creating a garden that's going to be efficient and you can actually keep up with.
Yep.
Which is something you wouldn't think about, honestly, if you're like, this is my first time, I'm going to plant something real quick, and that's it.
Right. Exactly. Now, I did see kind of like a rule of thumb to see if your plants have enough water. They say that you put your fingers like 2 or 3 inches like down in the soil to see if it feels moist. And so that will kind of determine like, okay, you need to make sure that your plants are being I guess watered. Now, I did read that it's better for plants to get water 1 or 2 times per week rather than a little bit each day. Again, this may also vary with the type of plant and kind of like the requirement of water. What we were doing is we were just putting our sprinkler out, obviously where it would hit like all of our plants. But it was every day and we would, do that. So when I read this, I was like, oh, you know what? That's actually pretty interesting to see it that way. I think, again, once you do your research on what you're planting, that's another thing of like seeing how that varies.
Yeah, and I feel like if you're kind of starting out, you're like, I don't know, I want a garden, but I don't know if I want to go full in and then have all of them die. I feel like the best thing to do is create a container garden, kind of something small that you can have in your kitchen if you're planting a few vegetables and stuff that you can easily just be like snipping off. And that way, if they do die, you're not losing all this money after having like bought all this mulch and all this other special fertilizer and stuff that you needed.
You're telling me.
And having that all go down the drain.
You're telling
Sorry.
me.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're going to have a container garden, kind of what you want to start is to obviously choose a container, that has like holes at the bottom. And you can kind of cover those holes with like a screen or a coffee filter and then add a few small rocks at the bottoms for like the water to drain out. Oh. And then you pour in your like potting mix and stuff.
That's so cool.
The soil that you have, and then fill it about 1 inch or 2 below the top of the pot or container, the rim, and then you just add your plants. And if you're kind of like, sometimes you're thinking of you want to add some seeds. Sometimes they say if you're starting out, get plants that are actually already small and grown. Oh, because sometimes that seed's not gonna like a sprout.
Okay.
Yeah. So start out with a smaller plant and then transfer that plant into your own containers and then have those grow for a little bit and then you can start picking off leaves that you need for your pasta or whatever that you're making.
Huh. Wow. See, I'm learning so much. And I'm also thinking back to all the things that I did wrong. Another thing, just to kind of go off on the watering your plants, like don't dump the water all at once because, obviously there are some plants that are very delicate. So depending on how you pour it as well, like that's why they say kind of like what you were saying with your pot plants or container plants. That's why they say to use like those, what is it called? Like the one with the shower heads, not a water hose, but little canisters.
Oh, the flowering can?
Yeah.
Or the watering can? Watering can. There we go.
Okay. Yeah. They say to use that, especially because if you just like kind of dump it on there, you can damage, your plants and all of that. So try not to be too harsh on them either. Some basic tools, like you mentioned was the containers. If you're going to be doing that, potting soil, your watering. Oh, see, I had watering can here. I could have just looked at here. And then a small trowel, which is, I guess a lot of people will say shovel, but it's really like your gardening shovel. But
yeah,
there's a different term for it. So that's the actual one. And that's, of course, if you're starting small. If you're going to do something a little bigger scale, then your tools kind of expand a little bit or,
yeah,
they get a little bigger. Yeah. Another thing is, in general, it's easier to pull weeds out of the ground when the soil is, it's wetter because they'll kind of just pop out. Now, I will tell you, as a newbie, I had a hard time telling who was a weed and what wasn't. Because some of my weeds looked cute, in my opinion. And to my eyes, they were green. They were flourishing. I thought, hey, I mean, this is...
There's some color here.
Yeah. And then my dad, which I will have to tell you guys, my parents they are so good at growing plants. It's so weird, but they're amazing at it. So when my dad came to see my garden, because, you know, of course, I'm thinking, okay, my garden's growing, so this is great. He kind of just like looked at me a little confused because he's like, you have a lot of weeds growing and you haven't pulled any of them. Now, I did read that mulch or straw actually helps reduce the weeds, you know, to make sure that it maintains the soil's moisture. We didn't actually buy mulch when we did our garden. We bought the soil, but we didn't buy the mulch. So that's probably another reason why I just had like...
You're just going off the list of things that went wrong?
Yes. Oh my goodness.
Okay, so I actually found 5 S's of a vegetable gardening success.
Oh, okay.
So this is particular to, like, if you're gonna plant vegetables for your, like, to supply for your little meals and stuff. Mm-hmm. So 1 is selection. So grow what you actually like to eat. So some of the easiest vegetables to grow are bush beans, lettuce, tomatoes, and squash. And so it's kind of like those are hard to kill kind of deal, and there's not too much work to put into it. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm so scared to try it because if I actually kill it, like that's gonna be so sad. So
yeah. And then the next S is the site. So put your garden near a walkway or somewhere where you're going to see it every single day. That way you're not, like, leaving it, you know, out of sight, because then it's out of sight, out of mind. And you're like, oh, I forgot to water it. And then a month passes. And then another month passes. And you just have weeds and straw growing in your garden. And so another thing is size. Always start small.
Uh-huh, yes.
So... I was talking about one of the, like, types of gardens that you have. And so they say to do a 3-by-6 foot raised bed and a few containers. Mm-hmm. And that way you can start building on top of it. And so you're not, like, having what I said before, having plants die and then having this space just kind of wasted. And you can kind of easily either start over or kind of just get rid of the mess that you made.
Right. That's true.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then the next S is soil. So the best garden has fertile, well-drained soil with like compost that gives it your plants more nutrients throughout time. Mm-hmm. And then sun. So always put your garden where it's going to get the most sun. They say a minimum of 6 hours of sun a day, of direct sunlight a day is kind of the best for most plants and vegetables to grow. Okay.
That's cool. I mean, that makes a lot of sense, and I think that's really helpful. Like, I'm gonna need those notes. I'm slowly recovering from my terrible
your last one?
Yeah. But I think that's gonna be my startup. I think I want to attempt 1 container plant and just kind of see how I can, you know, ease my way up to the point where I can then do what I was trying to do at the very beginning. One thing I will say is, like I mentioned, my parents are really great at, like, they have a green thumb. Everything they plant actually does well. Of course, my mom gives them lots of love. She's really big on her plants. But my parents, my dad specifically, just started his garden in the back. Mm-hmm. They're growing cilantro. They're growing a papaya tree. They're growing, like, lemongrass, like, for tea. They have the jalapeno peppers that's growing. Mm-hmm. So they're going all out, but there's no weeds, no cute weeds that, you know, I thought were actual, like, legit plants. And it looks awesome. It looks really great. Interestingly enough, I feel like my parents got the basics, you know, like, down hardcore, because they have the direct, like, especially like the papaya trees, like, in the direct soil. But my dad also created, so he has a combination of all of them. He also created a raised bed. It's not, like, ginormous, but for, like, the jalapeno peppers and all of that, like, that's in a centralized area. And then he has, I think, like, a few container ones where he wanted them to grow like within their own region. So I'm going to make sure to post that on our Instagram page because I think it's worth sharing. It's a really great success story. And I do know a couple people who are following us that do have a green thumb. So if you have any other like advice or suggestions, like please send those to us so we can share it publicly to the rest of our followers.
Yeah.
If you have any funny failure stories like mine, or maybe just sad also like mine, you know, feel free to share that with us too. I mean, we'd love to see the different adventures and things that you guys have gone through. You know, it's a work in progress for me, but I haven't given up yet. I'm still recovering, but I haven't given up on trying. All right, so I guess, do you want to transition?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess we're talking about plants, and a lot of purposes for plants is for food and stuff, but there is one special, plant that we see almost every day that provides oxygen and stuff. It also provides something essential that most of us use almost on a daily basis, which is paper.
Yes.
So we're going to take you through the process of the paper making process, pretty much.
Paper. And this also kind of came out of inspiration because I had just finished watching The Office, like, for the second time. And the show itself has its humor and everything, but I mean, it is what it is, right? It's a paper company. So I thought, well, I think we all maybe imagine it to be kind of like, okay, tree and then paper. But I actually watched a 4-part YouTube video, which I'm going to share with you guys. It's called Sappy Tube Videos on YouTube. I highly recommend you to go, even if you're like, only watch the first video. I honestly was sitting there with like, it was amazing. It was like a movie. I was really into it. I loved how they described it, the amount of detail. It was really interesting. So anything we don't cover on here, like the video will cover it for you, from the trees being cut and what kind of trees are best to you having the paper in your hand, like through production and like distribution and all of that. So that is my biggest recommendation. If we don't do it justice, like, please go watch that.
Okay. So I'm going to start out. The earliest paper was papyrus, which was made from the reeds by ancient Egyptians.
Mm-hmm.
And then paper was also made by the Chinese in the 2nd century. And they kind of say that the main person who had this was Kai Lun. I'm probably saying his name wrong. And he made his paper out of tree bark and old fish netting. And it was like a very well-kept secret, so much that it was 500 years before the Japanese acquired any knowledge of the method.
Wow.
So yeah, they started it out for sure.
Yep. And then, I guess jumping ahead a little bit, then the paper industry in North America was built in Philadelphia in 1690. There was the whole paper press or like newspaper, when they would talk about like these, not the ads, but like when all of the whole 13 colonies and everything, they had their newspaper things, or headings, as headlines is what I was thinking of. So that came into the Americas. Now wood is the main raw material, trees. Wood is the main like original raw material for it. If we really want to like break it down, like I mentioned in the beginning, like paper making 101, you can see it as a 2-step process, which is when the raw material is converted into pulp, and then the second process would be like when the pulp is converted into paper. So obviously there's a lot of like minor steps that happen, especially with the machinery and all of that, and just there's like a lot of chemical blending and all of that, but that's just kind of like a very reduced version of it.
Yeah, and then a lot of us think, paper comes just from trees, but a lot of it is kind of recycled materials that can also be used and added to the process in order to make like certain different types of paper. So a lot of people, they use like recycled newspaper, and so they kind of take out the dye and stuff from it, and then they use like fabric scraps from textile companies too.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like they add extra stuff to make different types of paper and then kind of recycle in their own way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I saw how, I mean, there's obviously benefits in recycling paper because they are able to reuse that, and obviously you're saving the trees. You don't have to go back all the way back to your raw material. You're kind of just reusing that paper and like reconstructing it for it to become a finished product all over again. Now, paper usually will get bleached, obviously, because we have most printer paper, white paper. Paper tends to be white. But they may also have like additional processing steps depending on the type of paper that is being made, so it depends like the quality of it, the color, and is it going to be glossy or does it need to be like kind of like cardstock where it's thicker. So in order to get that finished quality will depend on like the kind of chemicals or blending or things that they add to it. And then a couple of fun facts. During its lifetime, one American citizen will use about 465 trees for its paper needs. So that's a very scary number because we obviously know there's a lot of Americans, and
that's just Americans.
Yes, and it's a lot. It really is. Now, then I also saw 37% of U.S. paper pulp comes from recycled paper. So, obviously, we want
That's a significant amount, I feel.
Right. So, obviously, the higher this percentage, I feel like it kind of could offset the amount that we
hopefully in the future, we're going to be using a lot less trees than we are in the paper making process. But who knows?
Yeah. Well, that is true. I feel like a lot of people have sort of switched over to electronics and just how they go about taking notes, how they go about, distributing content. And so, not to say that paper is not being used significantly, but I do feel like there are quite some people who have made that transition. I still have a hard time with this because I'm a visual person and I really like to hold things. Yeah. So whenever I read that stat about, how much one American, I was like, oh man, I love journals. And yeah, it's just one of those like
you're things. Like, oh, I'm like double that.
Maybe. I try to recycle though.
Okay, so I guess I want to go kind of through the process of making the pulp.
Okay.
So basically what they do is they take those logs that they chop down, and then they kind of take off the bark and stuff, and then they make that into what is the wood pulp. And so the logs are tumbled in drums to remove that bark, and then they're sent into grinders, which break that wood down into even smaller pieces. And then they start pressing it down between kind of these huge like rolls.
Right.
This big kind of flatten it out.
Cylinder rolls.
Yeah, and then that pulp is then filtered to remove like any foreign objects that could possibly be in it. And then in that process, wood chips from those debarked logs are then like pretty much cooked in a chemical solution. And this is kind of like done in huge vats, and they're called digesters. Okay. Which kind of sounds gross. And so with those chips are fed into their digesters, they're boiled at like a very high pressure in a solution of sodium hydroxide and sodium sulfide. Okay. And so those chips then dissolve into that pulp, and that pulp is kind of used into the next process that it takes to make paper. And kind of in this stage is when they add the bleach to it.
Right, and they add all those things. So they, I think you mentioned this too. So they, in the videos I was talking about too, they show a lot of how the rollers are used in different stages of the process because, they have to be pressurized. And then obviously if they're going to have like other processing done to it, they need to make sure that the thickness is like across the board very consistent. And so they'll have it run constantly. And then you also have to dry your paper to eliminate anything else that the paper might have, like the material of it. And then I did see whenever they're going to, I guess, what is the word? To distribute it, like once it gets to the warehouse and stuff. So it becomes this really long roll, and then it gets divided into, I think, like thirds is what the video was showing. And so then they'll have another machine that will enclose it. That big roll will enclose it with like cardboard, so that the paper itself doesn't get damaged. Now that's when it's going to be shipped like as a roll. But then you can see whenever they're like cut the paper into sheets of paper, and then how they package that, which is what we see whenever we buy packages of paper from the store. So it's really cool, like the different ways or methods it gets packed and then gone. That was kind of my information from my end, because again, I just think the videos are great, and I'm rolling with that.
Yeah, well, I kind of went through like a printed up, because it's easier for me to follow for it. And so kind of what the next process that they had was called beating, which kind of sounds super aggressive. But basically they just pound that pulp and squeeze it, so all the water and everything inside of it is kind of like taken out.
Okay.
And then it's put into like this large tub, and they kind of just like beat the pulp until everything's kind of taken out of it. And then they add certain chemicals that will kind of influence what that paper is like, its characteristics. So like how opaque it is, and then how it'll kind of react to certain inks as well.
Oh yeah, I did see that. So that so the ink doesn't go through, but dries on the surface of the paper.
Yeah. So it's kind of, you would think it's kind of a simple process of making paper. Like, okay, it goes some trees, you kind of grind it down, and then you kind of flatten it out. But then there's all these other things that you have to add. How thick do you want it? How, like, is it going to be cardstock? Is it going to be cardboard? Is it going to be, you know, a white paper, a pink paper? Or is it going to have, like, a certain reaction to this type of ink where it'll bleed through and stuff? So it's kind of, the process is so much more intense than you would think about.
Right. And it's true. I think it's also one of those things, like, unless you're absolutely, I guess, drawn to it or have the time to do the research, like in our case, I think it becomes very simplified in our mind. But then whenever you, like, really look into it, it's amazing how there's, you know, you have to be so meticulous about, you know, the machinery and the pressure and the heat, and then when the water's going to cool it and all of that. Like, it's honestly amazing.
Yeah. And then I did want to bring up, like, one of the machines that it's like the actual name. It's called the Forgener, and it was invented in England in 1807.
That's cool.
So the Forgener is just like a moving belt that has a fine mesh screening that kind of flattens it out and stuff. And then you have that next process where it's like the cutting and what you were talking about, how they roll it up and stuff and begin to distribute it. So yeah, paper. Paper.
I wish we could insert that that song where they, you know, sing the whole, the people something.
Oh yeah. I love that song.
But I don't want to get sued, so I'm just pretend that we are inserting that song. We'll allow you to listen to it and then come back to us.
Just play it. Pause real quick, go play that song, and then come back.
Come back. Because we're going to move on to our next topic, which is urban legends.
Yeah. And so I feel like we gave it the title Urban Legends, but it's pretty much, like, the way I saw it was myths that I believed as a kid. That I was told.
Well, it's so funny that you said that, because at first I looked up urban legends, and then it quickly turned into, oh, I've heard of this one. Oh, I've heard of this one too. And then it just, you know, kind of started rolling that way. So some of these I may not have, like, a full-on explanation as to why it's been debunked, like why it's been proven that it's not true. But whatever I have on here, it's definitely not true. And so some of these have a funny story to it, and I'll explain that when we get there. But for those of you who may not be familiar with the term urban legend, it's really just like it could be a funny or like a horrific story or piece of information that may have been circulated through time, like as if it were true. Especially if it had happened to like somebody personally, and then they went on and shared that, and it became almost like, through storytelling where it seemed to be true and people believed it to be true and passed it on. And then somebody decided, is it really true? Like, and then they were able to prove it.
It's kind of that whole thing where you're like, oh, my friend's friend of another friend was like, this happened to their uncle, and so that's how I know it's true. Mm-hmm. But honestly, it's not even close to being remotely true.
Right. So, I'm one of the first ones that I found, and I started laughing so hard whenever I came across this because I forgot that this was a thing. But do you remember, and this was back, we mentioned this in another episode, where we were talking about back when everyone had Yahoo, again, not hating on Yahoo emails, but that was like the first like email I had. Remember when they used to send out chain letters? Like that was a thing. Yeah. And the chain letter was like, if you don't pass this on to like 5-10 people within the next 30 minutes or so, like something bad's going to happen. And it was always something bad's going to happen to your mom or something like that.
Yeah.
And so honestly, I think the first 2 chain letters that I got, I was so like scared. I was like, no, nothing can happen to my mom. And I would send it out. So I think I sent it out maybe like once or twice. And then it kind of like dawned on me like, dude, are you serious? Like, but there was always that like small smidge in me that was like, but what if it does happen?
What if it does? Yeah.
Do you want...
call me a terrible child, because I was like, nope, sorry, Mom. This ain't real.
Oh my goodness. So that's the first one that I came across, which, I mean, I hope if you're passing these chain letters, I hope it's like something positive or something that, makes your day and you just kind of want to spread the joy. But if you're passing these chain letters, like, you're okay. Like,
don't worry.
You're fine.
Yeah, I've seen somebody, like a meme, they're like, the reason 2020 is so bad is because nobody sent out those chain mail letters when we were younger. This is payback.
They're coming back to haunt us.
Yeah. So, one of the ones I found, it's not really a funny one coming off what you just had, but it's kind of the myth that if you dial 911, or like any emergency number with like within your area or wherever you live, it'll automatically charge your phone.
Huh.
Yeah. So it's not true, but this kind of came from the basis that on the BlackBerry, if you remember those from way back when, if your battery level was too low, the phone would automatically lock down, and so you couldn't use like a lot of the features on it to kind of just save up that battery. And people discovered that when you would call 911, or in this case it's 999, I don't know what number that is for or what area or what country, but that's also the number. I just wanted to say that this was kind of it, that when you would call and you hung up, it would kind of override that shutdown on the phone, and it would go back to being charged a little bit. But it's not true, and honestly completely not safe, because you could be blocking the call for something very important.
Right.
So don't do that.
Well, for BlackBerry users, or I guess no, for anyone in general.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. The next one I have, and okay, let me just state that everything coming from me is it's gonna be very funny or like ridiculous. I had to skip through all these scary ones, especially because some of them came with pictures, and I was like, nope, I can't
scroll.
Yes, because my mind just like, it goes crazy, and it picks up on one image, and suddenly I'm trying to sleep at night, and I close my eyes, and that happens to be
the image that pops up.
Exactly. Or I hear a noise and I'm like, oh, it's what I saw. So I'm terrible at these things. I'm such a scaredy cat. So the next one I have is that pools will turn a certain color if you pee in them. But apparently there is no such thing as a urine indicating dye that exists. Now, I used to believe this. So I would obviously never pee in pools because I was terrified that would happen. Like that would kind of just like follow me through, you know, and that's super embarrassing.
Deny, like, it wasn't me.
Yeah, and so I know that there's, like, some movies out there that kind of have used this, so I'd almost also, like, I mean, not to say that everything seen on a movie is true, but it would kind of, like, bring that to my mind, like, oh, okay, like, you do not want to have to experience that. This is not to encourage people to go and start peeing in pools, but, like, this is also just, like, it's not true.
Yeah. There's a sign that says, welcome to our ool. Well, see how there's no pee in it? Let's keep it that way.
Oh, that is...
saying pool. Yeah.
That's awesome.
So there you go. Speaking about swimming, there's the myth that you can't go swimming for 30 minutes after eating.
My mom will still tell me stuff about that.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the point is that what they think is going to happen is you're going to get a cramp or, like, a side stitch or that pain that runs out across your side.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll be so bad that you can't swim, and then you'll eventually drown and not be able to, I mean, you'll die. So, but the experts say there's almost no way that a cramp will cause you to drown or will be so bad that you can't swim to the edge of the pool and kind of hold on, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like you could get a cramp, but it's not going to kill you.
Oh my goodness. No.
Yeah.
Honestly, I do think that if, let's say the day of tomorrow, we went swimming and we ate, I could almost guarantee you that my mom would make a comment if I decided to go back in, or any of my siblings for that matter, we wanted to go back in right after eating. Like, I don't even think that her theory is what you just said. Like, that was a belief. I don't know what this weird Hispanic thing is, and I don't know if anybody else's parents still do this, but I remember one summer we were in Mexico, and we tried to go into the pool, like, right after eating, like, it was, like, our lunch break, and it wasn't just my mom, like, then my mom told my aunts that we were trying to go into, and it just, like, whoa, like, you...
From all directions, no?
Yeah, I was like, okay, sure, so we're sitting there kind of, like, bummed out, also cold, because, you know, when you get out of the water and you're still wet, and then so we're sitting there, like, shivering, kind of, like, just, like, waiting for the time to pass so we can go back in the pool, but...
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would, if you were, like, scared of getting sick and throwing up in the pool, that's a good excuse to, like, hold on and wait some minutes, like 30 minutes, and then get in so you don't throw up in another person's pool.
Mm-hmm.
Because I wouldn't want to clean that up.
That's true.
But, you know, I mean, you can swim. And if you throw up, that's on you.
At your own risk.
At your own risk, yeah.
Yep. So this next one, I guess I'm very oblivious, but so rice, I don't know. You know how they used to throw They used to throw rice at weddings.
Yeah.
I don't know if, like, people still do this, but they used to kind of, like, or they banned it in some places because they would say that rice wasn't good for birds because if they ate it, then birds would explode. Yeah. So, of course, I didn't research this, so I didn't know if it was true or not. But I could bring you my bucket list journal, and I honestly wrote on there on my bucket list, make a bird explode by feeding it rice. And it's been there over the course of, like, so many years. And every time I look at it, especially now, I'm like, you're evil, Marilyn. Like, that, why would you want to, not only that, but, like, okay, that's gross, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I've kind of just settled that in my mind. Well, this is not true. Because ornithologists have claimed that they have not ever seen this happen. Mm-hmm. So, you don't worry, you won't explode a bird with rice.
I mean, yeah, so don't try to be evil like Marilyn. Try to do that on purpose.
I mean, I never did it. I didn't cross it off, but it's just so funny that, like, it made it on there. Like, okay, like, my life would be fulfilled by knowing that I killed a bird. Like, that's terrible.
Okay, so you brought animals, so I'm going to bring it up too. Mm-hmm. One is if you touch a toad, you'll get warts. Like a toad or a frog, you get warts.
Mm-hmm.
Not true. Frogs and toads do have bumps on their skin that look like warts, but they're not contagious at all.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, warts are caused by a certain human virus and nothing to do with frogs or toads. But frogs do have a wart-like bump behind their ear. Not frogs. Toads have a wart-like bump behind their ears that can be dangerous. These parotoid glands contain a nasty poison that irritates the mouth of some predators and can often irritate the skin of humans.
Okay.
So they might not cause warts, but they can have other stuff.
Gotcha. Which I could see why that kind of got twisted, or where that probably came up or started. Yeah. My next one was, and I remember hearing this. I don't know where I heard it from, but right next to it, I put LOL in caps because I thought this was hilarious. So the fact that we only use 10% of our brain. So, I feel like between you and I, you're the more sciencey person. So this, I had heard it and I thought it wasn't something that like I dwelled on it, but it was just like when I had heard it, I was like, wow, that's crazy. Like the brain is an amazing thing. And it is. This is not to discredit it. But I mean, the 10%, all right. I mean, it's a complex organism in our body. So sure, we only use 10%. That's not the case. But the brain is a very complex thing, so if you believe that we only use 10%, false.
Sorry, you're wrong.
Yeah.
Another one I have is that eating carrots will give you better eyesight or night vision. So, I grew up hearing this all the time.
Same.
I'm still blind, so it didn't help at all. But, I mean, there's probably other reasons why I'm blind. Anyways, so they used to say that eating carrots was kind of the key to the pilot's success during, World War II? I had it written, and now I don't know. But I might have deleted it. So it was one of the world wars. And so what they kind of did was that they rolled out this idea that it was carrots that were helping pilots do so much better during this war, and gave them night vision and stuff, but really it was kind of their way to cover up the idea of, I want to say it right. The adaptation of radar technology.
Oh.
So that's how they could see in the dark and have that night vision, but they were trying to cover it up from the Germans from finding out that that's what the technology that they had.
Wow.
And so the UK Ministry of Food, which is now, I think they said not even in practice anymore, was telling them that eating carrots was kind of the reason for their success, but it wasn't really. It was just a whole thing of propaganda to keep the Germans from finding out what was happening.
Sneaky.
Yeah, but and then they said it was the Germans already knew, so there was really no point in lying about it.
Well, it cost us tons of vegetables on the table.
Yeah, but they say that carrots are good for your eyes because they have a beta carotene to make vitamin A. Well, your body makes vitamin A using beta carotene. Sorry, I said that wrong. And so it's actually very good with your eyes, and it helps it convert light into a signal that can be transmitted to the brain, allowing people to see in conditions of low light.
Gotcha.
So it'll make things go better for your eyes. So still eat your carrots, kids.
Yeah. So no harm done there. I actually like carrots. I don't know why I made that other comment, but I enjoy them. I like them more when they're boiled, because I like...
Oh, I hate them boiled. I'd rather have them
Really?
just plain. Yeah, I'm a weird kid.
Huh. No, I mean, that's probably another poll we could do. Interesting. The other one I have is that gum stays in your stomach for 7 years. Really,
I had on too.
Gum probably doesn't last in there more than 7 days. So it gets...
Yeah.
It goes through, just like any food. But this also kind of came from the idea that anything that could possibly get stuck to your throat. So that's kind of where that concept came from. If you swallow it, then it's going to be in there forever. And I actually remember telling kids in school, like in elementary, like it was told to me, so I would tell them like, "Ooh, you swallowed your gum. Wow, you're gonna be in so and so grade, and then you're finally gonna, digest your gum." And I don't know.
Yeah,
I
I
was a weird
remember one
child.
time swallowing my gum and I was like, it's gonna be in there for 7 years.
Same.
But yeah, I saw that, like, you don't technically digest it, it'll just pass right through you.
Mm-hmm.
The main, like, harm is if you, like, I guess eat a whole bunch of gum at the same time, and so it can, like, create a blockage in your intestines and stuff. That will cause damage.
Well, I'd be very interested in knowing what you would have, like, what would you possibly be doing to consume or, like, to swallow so much gum. So maybe that's why they don't like giving it to little kids, because some kids
they'll just
don't get the concept maybe right off the bat that it's gum and you spit it out.
Yeah, you just chew it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have one, which is that drinking coffee will stunt your growth. So I wasn't actually allowed to drink coffee when I was younger, but I used to steal sips from my parents' coffee.
Same.
And they would tell me the reason is because you'll be short. I came out short anyway, so it doesn't matter. But this misconception actually came from another misconception, which was that coffee causes osteoporosis, which is a condition that may cause loss of height. But coffee doesn't even cause osteoporosis anyways.
Oh, gotcha.
So, yeah. So it was a lie built upon another lie.
Gotcha.
So drink coffee.
For us, we weren't allowed to just because it was too strong for us. We wouldn't be able to go to sleep, that kind of idea.
Yeah.
But I can drink coffee and still go to sleep, so I'm good. The last one I have is that cracking your knuckles can cause arthritis.
I have that one too.
Don't, for anybody who's close to my mom, just don't pop your knuckles around her, because you'll probably still get reprimanded for it, that it's not good for you. And I mean, in a sense, it can cause like just a tiny bit of swelling, like whenever you pop it right then and there. But to say that will cause arthritis is not true.
Definitely false, yeah.
Yes.
So that pop that you hear between, like, of a cracked knuckle is caused by bubbles bursting in the synovial fluid, and that's the fluid that kind of lubricates your joints and stuff. So, just a little pop of gas in there.
And then I also saw that, it may not be very appealing to some people to hear it pop, so...
Yeah, there's people who, like, freak out when you, like, pop your fingers and stuff.
I
do it all the time.
I mean, I'm okay with the popping. I think what freaks me out, or I just don't like it, is when people will pop, like, their neck or their head, like, really,
I just did it right now.
Oh, really? Like, no, but when it's so intense and loud, like, that gets to me, because it almost hurts me.
It's that, like, really loud pop?
Yeah.
Yeah. I have this weird thing where, like, I can constantly pop my toes. And it's really gross, and I get it.
I remember you doing that.
Stop. Yeah.
I can do that with my ankle on both of them. I can
just keeps going?
Yep.
Yeah. I wonder what's wrong with us. We need to get that figured out.
We're still alive, though.
Yeah, we're good.
We're good.
And without arthritis.
True.
Okay.
Do you have another one?
No, I think that was it.
All right. Well, I mean, as always, I like to recap. So we started off with gardening. It took me a second. Gardening 101. So again, success stories or failures or beautiful gardens or not so beautiful gardens, like share. I want to see.
Pictures.
Exactly. Then we went over to, I forgot again.
Paper.
Yes, paper. I mean, paper, right? So I don't know what you could send us, but if you want to get creative, like, please do. We'll open it.
If you want, watch The Office. That's a great show.
That's true. Or send us your favorite Office meme. I mean, that's...
Yeah, your favorite Office quote. I have mine.
What is it?
It's written in my bathroom.
What is it?
It's the one where after Michael, like, he's like throwing up in the bathroom, and they go in and like, Michael, did you just throw up in here? And he's like, no, just pooping. You know how I be.
Oh, wow.
My family quotes that all the time. It's so funny.
That's funny. I don't think I have one yet. It took me a while to get through.
Oh, we watch that all the time. It's constantly on at our house.
That's funny. Yeah, my brother-in-law's like super into it. Well, I mean, I guess so is my sister and so is my other brother-in-law. Okay, never mind. Yeah, it's a family thing too.
It's a family thing.
I don't think I've caught up. I'm not like all the way up there.
Super intense.
Yeah.
And then we covered
urban legends. Oh, you're.
Yeah. And so you were talking about how you had to kind of search for these to get past kind of those creepy ones.
Yeah.
And I love those creepy ones.
Mm-hmm.
So what we had decided to do is create little mini episodes or series where we each cover different topics. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to be covering all things spooky and creepy. So talk about urban legends, where they come from, the reality of what happened, mm-hmm. Unexplained mysteries, unsolved mysteries, and kind of anything that kind of creeps Marilyn out.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And then Marilyn will be covering
the positive, inspiring, based on a true story, life events, and then how it applies to your to your life, and just kind of the takeaways. So, mine's meant to be inspiring and hopefully leaving you with that sense of I can conquer the world, or I can do it if I believe in myself, that kind of inspiring stuff. I'm, all about that. So, that's what we got for you today.
Thanks for joining us on our coffee break, I guess.
Yes. And we will see you. We will see you for the light roast, dark roast, and then for our next episode.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. See you guys. Have fun.
Bye.
Bye.